Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. We're talking the New 52, 10 years later. Hey everybody, before we get to the video, please don't forget to subscribe. Helps me out, helps the channel grow, lets you know when I drop new videos, all that good stuff. On to the video. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're going to be talking about the New 52. Why are we talking about the New 52, Brent? Well, we're talking about it because we have hit the 10-year anniversary of the brave, the bold, the almost refreshing and risky line-wide relaunch of DC Comics that happened in 2011 called the New 52. So if you don't remember, and this is fairly recent, DC Comics was doing their thing. Dan DiDio is still in charge. Jeff Johns was their superstar writer at the time, and they announced, I want to say it was like in June of 2011, that they were going to relaunch everything and go day and date with all of their titles. Remember 10 years ago when everybody was so fucking scared that digital comics were going to kill the comic book industry? That was 10 years ago, y'all. I mean, I'm still reading a whole bunch of stuff, all my new weekly stuff, a lot of trades on here, but I'm still buying trades because I want to read them in a physical format or I want to loan them out. Comic books are still alive, and that is a good thing. Digital day and date did not kill comics or anything like that. And I remember a number of hot takes during that time 10 years ago saying that the digital comics, the day and date, was going to kill comic book shops and stuff like that. That has not happened. I think the comic book shops, I think comics has grown year over year, or graphic novels have grown year over year for the last couple of years, and that's fantastic for the industry. It may not be superhero comics that's growing it, but that's another story for a different day. So, the New 52, right? It was a relaunch of everything. They said, screw it, coming out of Flashpoint, we are going to have a relaunch of every single title in the line. Everything is being canceled, including Detective Comics, including Action Comics, which I think were at like 900 at the time. So it was very, very like, whoa, this is something different because you're canceling these books that are going to hit 1,000. We know you're going to be the first company to hit 1,000 issues of a single comic. You're going to put out those anniversary issues, right? Like, that's only a few years away. Sure enough, they did. No big deal, but that was a big deal at the time because those books, Action Comics and Detective Comics, had never been canceled at all. So to cancel them was like a big step, and it was a big move by DC to say, like, we are going all in on this relaunch. Did it turn out that way? I don't really know. I feel like they should have really stuck to their guns on what they said, that they were going to refresh everything and do a new stories or retell stories or whatever they wanted to, but new histories instead of what they actually ended up doing, which was like, oh, we're going to save the Batman section of the DC universe and make it really confusing. Oh, we're going to save the Green Lantern section of the DC universe and make it really confusing. Because those are the ones that have, Green Lantern was very successful at the time. Jeff Johns was in charge. He was like, I don't want to undo any of my shit. And then Batman was the best character, the most famous character of their line, and they had so much history. Grant Morrison's still in the middle of his run of Batman Incorporated, telling his storyline. He's like, I don't want to give up any of my shit. So they kind of supplicated those two writers, I think. And then it kind of made everything a little bit more messy. And we'll talk about it as we go down the line. So what titles were part of the DC New 52 relaunch? Well, let's go through them alphabetically. They had a little different grouping scheme of like Batman, Superman, Justice League, The Edge, The Dark, horror, whatever, teens kind of thing. But let's go through them alphabetically. I'm going to roll a video here so you can see the covers. Action Comics, All-Star Western, Animal Man, Aquaman, Batgirl, Batman, Batman the Dark Knight, Batman and Robin, Batwing, Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Blackhawks, Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, Catwoman, DC Universe Presents, Deathstroke, Demon Knights, Detective Comics, The Flash, Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, Fury of Firestorm, The Nuclear Man, Green Arrow, Green Lantern Corps, Green Lantern New Guardians, Grifter, Hawk and Dove, I, Vampire, Justice League Dark, Justice League International, Legion Lost, Legion of Superheroes, Men of War, Mr. Terrific, Nightwing, OMAC, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Red Lanterns, Resurrection Man, Savage, Hawkman, Static Shock, Stormwatch, Suicide Squad, Superboy, Supergirl, Superman, Swamp Thing, Teen Titans, Voodoo, and Wonder Woman. So those are the 52 new issues that launched in September of that year. And you really had those titles up until, I think, I'm looking at this article here, May of 2012. So that's, not quite 12, maybe 8 months. Yeah, 8 or 9 months. That's a pretty good title. So I think where they fumbled, there are some great stories in the New 52. So let's highlight those first. Let's go through those first. I think the greatest story that came out of the New 52 is this one right here. This is Batman Court of Owls. So this is the first 11 issues of the Batman title by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This is a phenomenal book, and it blew everyone's mind as we were reading it. Maybe not the first issue, but certainly by like the 4th or 5th, we were all kind of like, oh shit, this is really going somewhere. And oh my, we did not know that Greg Capullo could draw like Greg Capullo draws now. Because he had been on Spawn for many years. He had done Haunt, and he was doing like the super gritty, dirty kind of style. And doing Batman allowed him to clean up a little bit. He changed his style a little bit, I think. So you had a lot more space. You had a lot more clean lines, even though it's still very much Greg Capullo. Like, you can see the resemblance in the stuff in Batman and Spawn. It's there, but it's definitely, I think, a new style for him. A little bit more animated, a little bit more cartoony than the gritty kind of realism, but still stuff he was doing then with Spawn. So this is the book that kind of launched and maybe kept the New 52 afloat. And Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo stayed on this book for 52 issues. So basically, when everything got to 52, that's when they stopped. They relaunched it. I think that's when Rebirth happened, right? You had Superman die and come back. You had a whole bunch of stuff, but they were on this for quite a long time. Probably the longest runs of a Bat team on any book, and I highly recommend this run. Not just this storyline, but the entire run to anybody wanting to read a good Batman story. Honestly, you don't have to understand Batman to read it. You don't have to read anything else. Just read Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's run. You'll be fine. The problem with it is that the New 52 was launched as a cold hard refresh, and then you open up Batman, and here's Nightwing in a red costume, and you're like, okay, well, I thought this was a relaunch. Well, no, Nightwing's still older, but he's got his own book too. All right, fine. Well, Damian makes an appearance later on in this story as well, and you're like, well, Damian, Batman's got a son. Like, why is that? Well, Grant Morrison's in the middle of telling his story, and we didn't want to throw that away, so that's still there. And you're kind of going along, and people are asking questions like, hey, how long has New 52 been around? And they're like, oh, well, we're joining our Heroes in Progress like 5 years after everything. And they're like, 5 years? Just talking about Batman, that guy's had like 6 Robins in 5 years. Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Stephanie Brown, apparently still a thing, because she was also in the Batman Incorporated title just before the New 52 as Batgirl. That was her role. And then you also had Damian Wayne. So yeah, 5 or 6. Lots and lots of Robins in 5 years. So you're telling everybody that who was Robin for how long? Like 1 year each? That's crazy. And they were like, well, yeah, kind of, sort of. It's scrunched, it's expanded, like it's a living accordion. We're still figuring it out. And it was clear by then that this idea of starting over fresh was probably the best way to go. And if they had started with this story without Robin at all, or without any of those characters, yeah, it might have been a little bit different. You couldn't have done the stuff you were doing with Nightwing. But even if you were still having him as Nightwing, you could have had, you could have introduced Tim Drake. You could have introduced all these Robins as the course went on, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to keep all the history and stuff with Batman. So at the same time you had all those Robins, you're saying that Batman actually did have his back broken recently by Bane. Yeah, that kind of still happened, but we're not quite sure how. Is Azrael around? Yeah, kind of maybe not. He was introduced later as a totally new character, and it seemed like Batman's back had never been broken. It's a whole thing, but we're trying to focus on good stories, and this is one that stands out. So you just kind of like wipe everything away, and you will be fine. I think the other thing that you gotta kind of talk about as a good story is Justice League Origin. I mean, this is the comic book. While it's not as great a read as Batman Court of Owls, it is the comic book that launched 1,000 ships. This was the first book on the stands in the first week. Jeff Johns, Jim Lee was committing to doing 12 issues. He didn't quite do it, but he did the first 6, and man, what a first 6 they are. Just in terms of the quality of art he was doing at the time. It's pretty phenomenal to see Jim Lee drawing all the premier superheroes on one team and in one book. Made this the book that everybody was buying at the time. This is the one that made Cyborg a member of the Justice League for no apparent reason other than Jeff Johns really likes Cyborg, or they, God forbid they want somebody of color on the Justice League as well. So you kind of made Cyborg that character instead of, I don't know, making it John Stewart Green Lantern, who everybody kind of likes better than Hal Jordan, although it is Jeff Johns after all. We know he's a Hal fan. You got The Flash is back to being Barry Allen, not Wally West. You got Aquaman here, not the Jason Momoa version we have now. You got Wonder Woman not wearing pants. That's a whole thing. But this first 6 issues was really, I think, was kind of strong. I mean, you had the Justice League Origin or Justice League War animated movie that was kind of really heavily based on this. You got a bunch of other takes that come from this, and this is kind of where the seeds of the events that shaped the New 52 were all laid here. You have Trinity War shortly thereafter, which combines Justice League Dark, and the Justice League of America, the new book that launched a little bit later on, and they're all fighting. And then you're introducing these concepts like Pandora and the Phantom Stranger, and you're kind of like flying by the seat of your pants here because you're introducing Hawkman. You got Simon Baz as Green Lantern in Justice League of America, that storyline. You got Firestorm, you got Hawkman, you got Vibe. You're introducing new characters at the same time as you're assuming people are still familiar with the old ones, and you haven't really done the work of introducing everybody properly because you're kind of doing this thing where you assume everybody knows who's around 5 years into the universe, right? And Trinity War leads right into Forever Evil, which I still think is very strong. It's got David Finch on art, and it still is a really interesting story. I just don't know that it's going to be the tale as old as time. And then finally, you have, this is why I'm talking about this Justice League book, just in general, because you have the finale of the New 52 is this right here. This is the Dark Side War. It's not a crossover. It's like 12 issues by itself. The last year of Justice League, the last year of the New 52 was this kind of meeting of Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor, and realizing that they were enemies or friends at one time. You have Grail introduced. You have the New Gods. This character of Mobius, from the Mobius chair, all this weird stuff. And kind of Batman seeing that there are 3 Jokers when he sits on the Mobius chair at one point, which is set up on the 3 Jokers thing that him and Jason Fabok did. So I think as the title got along, you got more interesting because you had Jessica Cruz join as the Green Lantern of Fear or whatever. You had different characters. You had Shazam join the team, and that Shazam book is still very good. That was a backup in the pages of the Justice League monthly book. You would get a couple pages, I think starting with number 7 maybe, from Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. And they did collect all that. You can go pick it up as a single graphic novel. It's very good. The first Shazam movie draws from it heavily. like Jeff Johns is getting paid from all these DC movies because he's basically making them do his own thing and use his stuff. Aquaman, the first year of Aquaman is really worth reading, and the Justice League book before Trinity War had a crossover with Aquaman called The Throne of Atlantis, which they turned into an animated movie. And then you have Aquaman introducing the Trench, which were introduced in the Aquaman movie. So you have Jeff Johns kind of not really architecting the whole universe, because he didn't do a very good job of it if he was doing it, but he was introducing new elements that were then pulled through the disparate DC media in the last 10 years. And, I think they're concepts that work. Otherwise, they wouldn't have used them, right? Unfortunately, they're all written by the same guy. So it's just kind of weird. The other big story I think really, really worked was the another Scott Snyder book was Swamp Thing, and the Jeff Lemire book Animal Man. So these are books that nobody really thought of as like premier books. Alan Moore had done a Swamp Thing run in the 80s, and there had been other runs after that, but he wasn't really a premier character. Yeah, he had a weird TV series in the 80s and a movie by Wes Craven, produced by Michael Uzlan, who actually did the Batman movies thereafter. But, Swamp Thing was kind of a weird character. And then you have Jeff Lemire and Scott Snyder take these two characters of Animal Man and Swamp Thing and kind of merge them together in this idea of the green and the red. The green being like the living plants of the world, and the red being all the living animals connected. So it's kind of like an internet of the plants and an internet of all the animals connected through some weird supernatural being. And then you have this third entity, this third thing called the Rot, which is like the interconnectedness of death in all these things. And the Rot wants to kill everything. It wants to kill the green, it wants to kill the red. And over the first, I think it was like 18, 19 issues, you had the separate stories, and they were kind of hinting at each other, and then it culminated in this event, this crossover called Rot World. I think maybe like 16, 17 issues in, there's this crossover between the two books, and you could kind of tell when you're reading that and you have Swamp Thing teaming up with Animal Man, how well I think these writers work together to kind of bring this all to a head, and made for a really, really cool event that doesn't get enough love. Honestly, I think those two books, having never read Animal Man or Swamp Thing before, when I was reading those two books, I was astonished about how much I cared about the characters with Buddy's family and Animal Man, and how much I loved Yannick Paquette's artwork in Swamp Thing. It's just a sight to behold. Meanwhile, in Animal Man, you have Travel Foreman and Steve Pugh doing some great work. So all those things come together with two writers basically working to tell the same story that meets up much, much later in their storyline was really, really cool. And I really, really enjoy that one. So if you want to go pick those books up, I recommend those two. The other thing coming out, the Bat books, I think were kind of strong. Cal Higgins' Nightwing run, I think, is okay. The other thing that really came out of this is you had Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason coming off of Green Lantern Corps before then and coming on to Batman and Robin. They'd done like a short Batman and Robin stint on the title before the New 52 with Dick and Damian, but now we're talking about Bruce and Damian Wayne, and that storyline throughout the New 52 was heart-wrenching. It was like a gut punch. It was about a father and a son and love and loss and what a father would do to go and save his son and redeem him, and just a really cool, heart-wrenching story. And you can follow that in the Batman and Robin title all the way through. You don't have to really read anything else. The only weird thing about reading that story is that what happens to Damian Wayne happens in the pages of Batman Incorporated at the very end. And there's so you just have to know that this event happens, but there's a silent issue that coincides with that event. Like, that event happens in Batman Incorporated. You immediately jump over to Batman and Robin. I don't know what number it was. Maybe it was like 18, 13, who knows. It was in the teens, I think. But it's a silent issue. And Patrick Gleason drew the fuck out of this issue. And there was no word balloons, no dialogue. It was just one man and his grief. And you really felt it in that issue. And that was one of the most like phenomenal issues I've ever read was a silent issue following that big event in Batman Incorporated. What else can we talk about? You got Batwing in here, and this Batwing was kind of like a weird. He was a new character taking place in Africa, and I think he'd been introduced in the pages of Batman Incorporated maybe the year prior. So they went with this African character. You had Ben Oliver on art, and it was a really cool looking book and a really cool looking costume. Unfortunately, halfway through, they kind of pivot from that because he wasn't a character that had any history with Batman. He was just like, he was a member of the Batman Incorporated. He was a Batman over in Africa, dealing with that nation's problems and warlords and things like that. Wherever, I can't remember exactly where in Africa the book took place. But then they decided to pivot away from that idea and make it about Luke Fox, who is the Batwing everybody knows now thanks to his inclusion in the Batwoman TV show. I'm not currently watching that or caught up on it, but I know that he has donned that version of the Batwing costume in that TV show, which is great. I think it's fantastic. Bring all these characters in. It was just a weird thing that, like, you know, you went from like Batwing. I don't know I feel like it was early in the run. I mean, the title didn't last all 52 issues the way that others did, but it was just a weird switch. It was this character, this African Batwing before, and then the next issue was like, oh, we're going to introduce Luke Fox and make him Batwing, and that was it. Change writers, change art teams, all that stuff. Birds of Prey. This was a weird one. I didn't really think it was that good. You had Gail Simone, who was doing Birds of Prey. I think before then she was gone. That was unfortunate. But she did get a chance to do Barbara as Batgirl. This was the other thing about the New 52 is like they wanted their old classic characters back. So they were like, we want Barbara Gordon back as Batgirl. So they just had it. They had it. They said, we want it, we have it. It's a relaunch. We can do whatever we want. But since Batman still has all of his history, you still have the lingering story of the Killing Joke out there, and you're going like, well, what happened with Batgirl? Like, was Oracle a thing? Was she not a thing? And then they're like, yeah, you know, it's been somewhere in between these 5 years, Barbara Gordon was Batgirl, got shot, had all these adventures as Oracle after being paralyzed, and had the Birds of Prey, kind of, sort of, maybe not. I want to say that maybe the Birds of Prey weren't active, but she was still Oracle. It was a whole thing. It was really weird. And then all of a sudden, you find out later in the run that, like, you know, oh yeah, she's been healed because of like a chip in her back, and that is still the story to this day. Is there's some chip implant inside Barbara Gordon's spine that is helping her walk upright. So if you're reading the pages of Nightwing now, she's sometimes Batgirl, sometimes not, and decided kind of step back into that Oracle role because she was putting too much strain on her back, when really I feel like they ran out of stories to tell as Barbara Gordon Batgirl and wanted her back as Oracle, or the fans were crying out for it now that we've kind of like merged back into the everything universe now. Like, you know, after Rebirth, everything is all one universe. Batwoman, you had J.H. Williams III doing writing and art here. I remember reading this a little bit, but not as strong as the Greg Rucka stuff, and you know, this title did last for a long time. You know, you can't say the same for things like Blackhawks. I think that lasted maybe 10 issues. All-Star Western was kind of like a bone to Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, who were doing Jonah Hex for, I feel like, almost 60 issues before then. So they got to continue their Jonah Hex stories in that, but it was kind of it was one of these anthology books that DC had introduced so that they could tell different stories or different types of stories and see if those would sell, and they could launch something out of that. So All-Star Western, I'm not sure how long it lasted. I wasn't a reader of Jonah Hex, so it wasn't a title that appeared to me. DC Universe Presents was another one of those things, and that one was kind of cool because it told little stories, like 3 or 4 issues, and they would jump to a new story with the next one. My biggest letdown was this Blue Beetle one. It had gorgeous art, but the weird thing is that we had a Blue Beetle series coming out of Infinite Crisis that was phenomenal. It lasted for 36 issues. You had Keith Giffen on it. You had Raphael Albuquerque on it before he blew up on American Vampire, I believe. And I forget who else was writing it at the time. You had the introduction of the Reach, all the story. Peacemaker was a sidekick on it. You know, he had Cully Hamner doing the character design and drawing it in the first couple of issues. I love that original Blue Beetle series. So you get to the new 52 and they're like, hey, we want Blue Beetle to be Jaime Reyes and we want him to be a prominent character. So cool, awesome. Well, instead of just picking up where they left off with that last storyline, they were like, hey, you know what? He doesn't have a whole bunch of story. We can refresh him. And they just kind of like threw away the 36 phenomenal issues of the original Blue Beetle series and gave us this kind of okay Blue Beetle that lasted for 20 issues. And then it got relaunched with DC Rebirth with Keith Giffen coming back, but with Scott Collins. And I didn't really feel that one in the Rebirth issues. And then now Blue Beetle is just not in, he doesn't have his own comic book. I feel like because they didn't launch off what they already had. Like if you want to say that there's 5 years of stories, and you can certainly have Blue Beetle say, oh yeah, those 36 issues, those happened. But they were kind of retelling the origin again after he had just been introduced to everybody, and it was a new origin. Not quite the same, not quite different, but enough for that they could say, oh, well, this is the new origin of the Blue Beetle, or his new first adventure, things like that. It just wasn't as cool. Like Paco was still there, but he wasn't as cool as he was in the original title. It was just kind of a big letdown. The art was good, but man, this just really fell flat for me. Captain Atom, I think lasted 8 issues. Catwoman #1 there was a big to-do about Catwoman #1 because it featured written by Judd Winnick, drawn by Gilliam March, who draws some really lovely men and women, and featured Catwoman like grinding on Batman at the end of the first issue on a rooftop, like they were having sex, and they were like, oh my god, Catwoman and Batman having sex. Whereas 10 years later, now we're talking about how how Batman doesn't, perform oral sex because heroes don't do that. That's weird. Deathstroke #1. This was a new version of Deathstroke who was like way more armored. Didn't make any sense. You had Rob Liefeld doing art or writing on this at some point in time. Demon Knights #1. I think this was an interesting title, although it didn't go very far. Maybe 12, 16 issues. It was about Madame Xanadu, Etrigan, Merlin, all these guys having an adventure in Camelot times. It was a really cool idea for a story. It just didn't catch on with readers. Detective Comics, this was Tony Daniel was doing a Batman run coming off of Grant Morrison's Batman R.I.P. They said, you can write Batman, you can draw Batman. He said, fine. And then he didn't want to leave or something, and they were like, hey, you want to do Detective Comics? And they're like, yeah, you just continue what you were doing. Okay, cool. The first issue was controversial because it had Joker cutting off his face at the end of the first issue, and then that carried over into Scott Snyder's run, and like it was kind of unfortunate because you had this Tony Daniel do this moment with the Joker. Maybe it was editorial mandated or whatever, but he never got to play with it after that. It was like, yeah, do this moment for us, and then Scott's got it, and he's going to take over, even though he's the newer writer on Batman, and you have more seniority. I don't know. It was weird. The Flash. This is one I think that I can recommend. The Flash here. Francis Manapul, Brian Buccellato doing the writing and the art. Buccellato was a writer as well as the colorist, and Manapul was doing the art and the writing, scripts, plots, whatever. Like they're working as a team in conjunction to write the book, do the art, do the colors, and everything. I think they had a letter outside of them as well. But I really like that Flash run. Boy, did I like that Flash run. You had Gorilla Grodd. You had the idea of like Flash using his brain to think in super speed, I think, for the first time in a long time. This Flash run really made me like Barry Allen more than I think I had liked him before. Because they made him very human, very down to earth. It also did some weird stuff with, who is it? Wally West. So you had this new character, Wally West, this new Kid Flash, who was, they decided they wanted Wally West to be black, right? Okay, fine. So they introduced Wally West. Great. Then later on down the line, after the New 52, they said, hey, about that, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to bring back classic Wally that Jeff Johns had written, and we're going to bring him back into the universe. But we're not going to get rid of the black character. They're both going to be Iris's nephews named Wally. both of them. One of them is her brother's son, who got introduced as, I think, the original Reverse Flash in this storyline. Not Eobard Thawne. He was like this weird black, not as a character. He was like a darker skinned character, but he had like this black armor and red lightning instead of yellow lightning. Almost as if like you darkened up the Flash with a Sharpie kind of thing. He was going to be that character's son. So that's fine. That's cool. He was running around as Kid Flash for a while. But when they brought back other Wally, it was like, yeah, Iris has two nephews named Wally, and it doesn't really make sense. And now, is regular Wallace West, I think they're calling him now, is he still around? I don't know. I think he might be still Kid Flash, running around, but I have not seen him very prominently in the DC universe. Is he still in the Teen Titans book? Maybe. Oh, Teen Titans, that's another one to go through. Fury Firestorm, Nuclear Man, you had Ethan Van Sciver and Gail Simone doing the writing, Ethan doing the covers. I forget who was doing the art, but it was kind of a neat idea that seemed to fizzle very quickly. Maybe they didn't get along. Green Arrow #1 was just an atrocious book, couldn't find its footing. Green Lantern #1 was very interesting because it was basically Jeff Johns continuing his Green Lantern story coming out of Blackest Night and War of the Green Lanterns. And Sinestro has the Green Lantern ring now. He's no longer a Yellow Lantern, even though there's still all these other lanterns around, as you will see. We still have Green Lantern Corps. We have Green Lantern New Guardians, which was Kyle. That was his book, Kyle Rayner. But he's surrounded by all these different lanterns of the other Corps, and they're all trying to find whatever the White Lantern was after Brightest Day, right? Grifter... they started to bring the Wildstorm universe characters over, and you'll see this here with Grifter and the Stormwatch and Voodoo. Grifter was kind of a weird book. I think Kafu did the art, and he's the guy on Iron Man right now. He's a phenomenal artist, and that was the thing I loved the most about flipping through that book was his art. Hawk and Dove, written and drawn by Rob Liefeld, I think. More or less said about that, the better. I don't know. Vampire, this was an older thing I'd never heard of that apparently was an older DC comic that they decided to revive, although it is what gave Andrea Sorrentino his big start. Everybody took notice of him because he launched this book with the New 52. Justice League, you had these weird things going on. You had the regular title, you had Justice League Dark, which was Madame Xanadu, Deadman, Zatanna, and Black Orchid, and John Constantine doing stuff together, and you're like, why are they called Justice League Dark? That's a really weird title for a book. Like, the Dark Justice League? No, Justice League Dark. This is the Dark Justice League. So you're like, the Dark Justice League. And they're like, no. It's called Justice League Dark. Now we've had 2 movies with this team of animated movies, and it seems like there's an HBO Max series or movie coming called Justice League Dark, even though it's kind of like what the Zack Snyder film is, if you really think about it. Like, it's not really. It's kind of a dark movie. Anyway. Then you had Justice League International. So this was them trying to give Booster Gold a shot. Now, I think Dan Jurgens wrote this title. You had Guy Gardner there. You had Fire. You had Fire and Ice from the classic team, as well as some other characters from the 52 comic, The Great 10. I forget the character's name, but he's like one of the Chinese superheroes from there. Vixen, Batman leading the team, Rocket Red. I liked this book. I really did. I thought it was a little bit more fun than I expected. And I like Booster Gold. I was liking what Dan Jurgens was doing at the time before the New 52, so I kind of followed him over here. The costume redesign for Booster Gold didn't really work, but it is what it is. Legion lost. Legion superheroes came and went. They tried to do a couple things with the Legion. They never stuck around. Men of War, another anthology title. Mr. Terrific, meh. Nightwing, I think, was an interesting title, and I really did like this red look of Nightwing, where he had like the red shoulder chest. There was a shot in, I think it was in an issue of Batman and Robin, because it was drawn by Patrick Gleason, and it was then that I understood why they moved Nightwing to this red outfit, because you had Batman and you had all the Robins together. So you had Red Hood running around with a red helmet, and he had a red bat on his chest. Then you had Nightwing, who's got the red symbol on his chest. Then you had Robin with the whole red tunic, and then you had whatever the fuck Tim Drake was, Red Robin at the same time. So all this kind of red tied in together, and I was like, oh, that works really well, why Nightwing has this red outfit now. And then with Rebirth, they were like, no, we're going to move him back to the blue, and they did, now he's back to his classic blue, which is fine, but I did like when you brought the whole team together, everybody's in the same color, it really made sense. Like, you break away from Batman, you put some red on your outfit, and we know you're part of the same group. OMAC, meh, I didn't read that. Red Hood and the Outlaws was interesting for a while. It had Kenneth Rocafort on art, and who was writing it? One of the old 90s writers that did X-Men. I can't remember. Oh, it's killing me. Anyway, it was interesting for a while, and then it went haywire, and now it's, you can follow the storyline from that first issue to whatever Outlaw Red Hood book is going on now, or just ended recently, where he had this terrible looking half mask and a crowbar as part of his outfit. Really, really confusing. When he's running around with Artemis and Bizarro, and he's, like that storyline follows from this for 10 years, basically. They're trying to tell this storyline, and I never really understood it. I like the idea of him leading a team of outlaws, but they really tried to tie it in with Talia al Ghul and this weird, like, syndicate and stuff. It's just, no thanks. Red Lanterns #1. This book was one of the Green Lantern spin-off titles, and it didn't really get good until much, much later in the run when actually Guy Gardner becomes a Red Lantern. That's when this book got interesting. But the first couple issues here, they're drawn by Ed Benes. They're pretty to look at, but they're pretty awful reads. Resurrection Man, I don't think that stuck around very long. Savage Hawkman, another one that didn't stick around very long. I think Tony Daniel was writing this, and Philip Tam was doing the art. And I think Rob Liefeld comes in a little bit later to take over. I don't really remember. Static Shock, unfortunately, only lasted 8 issues. I don't even think it really got a chance to get off the ground. Stormwatch, I was reading. And it had Martian Manhunter, Midnighter, and Apollo tied in with the DC Universe here. And really kind of trying to make sense of, I guess they were kind of the Authority. They were another super team. They almost went up against, did they go up against the Justice League? You had people from the Authority in here, the city guy, not Jenny Snow, Jenny Moonlight, or whatever the hell. I don't know. Again, I guess it didn't work because I don't remember much about it. Suicide Squad, this introduced Harley Quinn as a member of the Suicide Squad, so you have the New 52 to thank for Harley Quinn being in the Suicide Squad movies, both of them. Superboy #1, this one was fucking awful. So instead of Superboy being, and this is the whole Titans era of the New 52, is just awful. I don't know if he's like a new clone, so they totally rebooted Superboy. He's no longer Con-El, so all the stuff Jeff Johns did with him in the Teen Titans run before then is all blown to smithereens. He's a new character. He's kind of an asshole. He's got a terrible costume, and he's not really teaming up with anybody. Supergirl, I think, was interesting for a little while, this new version of Kara, but again, they keep changing the story. They keep wiping it away, and they're never really sticking with anything. Superman #1. The Superman book had a long, hard struggle in the New 52. You had some sort of truth where I think Superman stopped being Clark Kent much, much later on. Or was that after Rebirth? I can't remember. Then eventually, so you have Grant Morrison telling this new origin of Superman over in Action Comics with Rags Morales and a couple other artists. And then you have Superman's regular stories going on. And George Perez does the first arc. I think Dan Jurgens was writing. Then that gets wiped away. Kenneth Rocafort jumps on and does some stuff. That gets wiped away. So this Superman book has like a tumult of artists just over and over and over again. And they could never find a real story, never find a really good take on the character. And it wasn't until the end of the New 52 where New 52 Superman dies in this big crossover between Action Comics, Superman, and I think maybe one other book. Because they had introduced the old Superman who was living, somehow didn't get wiped away, and this was like an alternate Earth Superman that had John Kent with Lois Lane. They were hiding out somewhere. So this is like the bearded Superman with the black suit, the more recent images of that. They had New 52 Superman die right before Rebirth, and he tells bearded Superman, you got to take over for me. So it's like, okay, I will. So with Rebirth, you have the beginning of the bearded Superman story taking over as Superman. Now John Kent's in the main DCU, and you have Super Sons going on. Then maybe like a year after that, they're like, no, you know what? We're going to do away with this whole idea, and we're going to have something called Superman Reborn, where they just merge the two storylines of New 52 Superman and bearded alternate Earth Superman, who's trying to carry on New 52 Superman's thing, and they just merge them, and they're like, just forget everything about New 52 Superman. We're bringing Superman's history back. We should have never blown it away, because there was, again, all these questions about, like, what's happened with Superman? Was he ever electric blue? Did he get killed by Doomsday? And it was a whole lot of yes and no and yes and no, when they should have just blown it all away and started from zero from the very beginning and said, nothing matters, everything is new. We're going to stick to our guns here. And really, the only people that really succeeded in doing that, I think, were the Swamp Thing and Animal Man titles. We talked about that. Teen Titans #1. You got Barcode Superboy in here. You got Wonder Girl. You got a new Kid Flash with Bart Allen. You got Red Robin, who's Tim Drake, who apparently, this was the fucking dumb one. Tim Drake, best Robin all around, I think everyone can agree on. Maybe one day Damian will overtake that. Well, we will see. But they give him this new outfit with wings, and you're like, okay, all right. And they're like, he's going to be called Red Robin because you want him to be around, but he can't be Robin because Damian's Robin because of Grant Morrison and that whole thing. You're like, okay, all right, Red Robin, that's fine. And he was running around as Red Robin before, during the countdown to New Crisis, looking for Batman. So he had his own book as that character in this different costume than the one we got in New 52. But then they go, Tim was never really a Robin? And you're going, whoa, hold up. What? And like, yeah, he was never really a Robin. He was called Red Robin the whole time, and it's a thing. It's a thing. He's always had that costume. That's what he ran around in as Robin. And you're like, really? And they're like, no, not really. He did wear the Robin outfit. It just had 2 R's on it. You're like, why would you wear the Robin outfit with 2 R's? Well, because he was called Red Robin. That doesn't make any sense. So that whole shit has been wiped away too with Rebirth. He was a fucking Robin. He's running around as Robin. It's just atrocious. Voodoo. This was a book. Sammy Basri, beautiful art. I don't know what the hell was going on in the story. I think it lasted 9 or 10 issues. Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman. So this, I think, was one of the more successful ones that unfortunately didn't get stuck around. This was, is it Garth Ennis? Brian Azzarello. Nope. Not the shamed guy. Brian Azzarello. I get those guys mixed up a little bit. Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chang doing the art on this book. Relaunching Wonder Woman, clean slated everything. And they were like, we got a take, we're doing it, we're sticking with this take. And they stuck with this take, and I like this take. Unfortunately, with everything else with Rebirth, it just gets blown away to smithereens and kind of refreshed and pulled everything back in from the old DC universe. So, there's a handful of books here I think that were interesting, that were really successful. There's some other later titles that I really, really liked. I liked the Ray. It doesn't have the New 52 branding on it from DC Comics or whatever, but it was Jimmy Palmiotti was trying to do, I think, like a Freedom Fighter series, so he did a couple of miniseries. And I picked up the Ray because Jamal Igo was drawing it. I think this was the last major thing he did for a big publisher before going on his very successful independent streak he's on right now. Good for him. But I really like this character of the Ray. It was a new design. It was a new character. It wasn't the old one. It wasn't the original one. They did a Phantom Girl series, and I think that never caught fire, and I don't know if they did anything after that. They did do like a Freedom Fighter series and stuff later on down the line, but it wasn't these new characters that they introduced and developed, which I thought was kind of unfortunate. So the New 52 as an experiment, I think you can say it did fail, although it did give us some good stories. But overall, like if you're looking at this original lineup of these 52 books, what worked, right? You had Batman working. The whole Batman line worked very well. Batman Incorporated, Batman and Robin, and the Batman title worked very well. Nightwing, I think, was working okay. He had a pretty long run on Batwoman. The next thing going on after that, I think Flash worked. Again, Animal Man and Swamp Thing worked for a while they were going really strong. Green Lantern worked, I think, up until Jeff Johns left the book in issue number 20. And then after that, it kind of floundered a little bit until Rebirth happened along, I think. So, but that was really stuff that was pulled over from pre-New 52. So you could make an argument that anything that really worked in the New 52 was because they pulled from stuff before and kept it around, like all the Batman history, all the Green Lantern history. The really, really hot, fresh takes sometimes did work, sometimes didn't. Justice League was kind of off and on, Suicide Squad probably works because it introduces King Shark and Harley Quinn to the Suicide Squad, to that team, and now they're on the movies. You could say that worked as well, but everything else I think kind of failed, and that's probably why they booted it all with Rebirth, and said screw it, we're bringing everything back, and now we're in the post Rebirth era, and everything is kind of like as it once was, and now we're dealing with the infinite frontier, and all of our characters know that their universe was rebooted multiple times and all this other stuff. So is that working right now? I don't really know. I can't say for sure, but I can say that it was an exciting time, because I'd been reading DC Comics, but I was excited to read new fresh tales, new fresh takes, and to throw everything else away. As a younger reader, I was 25 at the time. So it was exciting to me. I picked up a whole lot of this stuff. Unfortunately, it never stuck around because you had a lot of the older readers who are now 45, 55, or whatever. The guys still going in all the time, that were really banging on the walls going, I want my classic Wonder Woman back. I want my George Perez Wonder Woman tales back. I want my classic Superman back. I want my classic Batman back. I want my Tim Drake back. Even though some of that stuff didn't work, you give me my Wally West back. That I would think really were the loudest voices in the room, instead of the guys going, no, we should stick to the guns and stick with the idea of telling new stories and new characters. So I think the backpedaling, all the backpedaling they did in the first year or so with Batman, Superman, their histories, Tim Drake, just kind of put them on bad footing, to where the loud retro fanboys were able to topple over this editorial team at DC Comics, to where they were like, well, all right, bring that back. All right, bring that back. All right, that too. All right, well, this is really confusing now, how much stuff we brought back. So yeah, we need to redo it, and that's where you have Rebirth. And the Rebirth books are great. They're great. I think they were stronger at the very beginning. The whole Rebirth line is way stronger than the New 52 line, and that says a lot. So it was an interesting experiment, but I think the one thing it did do was that it brought digital comics forward to being day and date. Marvel did their stuff day and date shortly thereafter. I feel like they were probably day and date before 2012. Maybe by the end of 2011 they were, but they had a similar event after the New 52, Marvel Now, and I think maybe that's when they went day and date. I'm not sure. But everything's been day and date ever since the New 52 and DC said, we're going day and date on digital comics. And basically, that's how I've been reading my books ever since they went digital. In 2011, I had to go to France for work, and I bought myself my first iPad. It was not this one. It was an iPad 2 at the time. This is my third one. And I bought a bunch of books on digital. I had my first Android phone at the time 10 years ago, and I was buying them on my little phone, reading them on Comixology, doing the guided view. Then I bought an iPad, and I found out, hey, I have good vision. This isn't that far off in terms of a comic book in terms of size, right? So it's not that bad of a reading experience. It's really only a little smaller. I mean, it is smaller when you look at the bezels and stuff. But this is a second iPad Air 2, but the original iPad had a smaller screen, but still it wasn't terrible. If you got really good vision, an iPad is a great reading experience. You're not going to mind the smaller font, I think. But if you do have okay vision, even with glasses, I still think it's worth a shot. But if you want to stick to your physical copies, that's fine. I have some still, you know, in trade that I want to reread over and over again. That's what I bought. But yeah, I think it was an interesting experiment, and it's fun to reflect on it and go like, what worked, what didn't work, and here's why it didn't work. I think it was honestly because they didn't stick to their guns and say, wipe everything away. If we're gonna do this, do it. Wipe everything away. It's the same thing with Crisis on Infinite Earths. You know, they rebooted Superman but kept Batman's history, or redid it all. You know, and that one I think probably is the one that worked the most of the reboots. But you know, this one they should have stuck more to that original idea of like, we're gonna wipe everything away and tell brand new stories, and do that way. But there we are, the New 52, folks. Is this video gonna be 52 minutes long? I don't think so. But thank you guys for going down that journey, that memory lane with me. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let me know what you think of the New 52 down below. What was your favorite book of the era? Mine, I think, are a tie of the Snyder Capullo Batman and the Manapult Flash. Let me know what your favorite is down below in the comments, and we will see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.